Listen closely, because this moment right here is not just another video in your feed. This is a mirror, and what you see in it might make you uncomfortable if you're honest with yourself. You've been telling yourself you're going to change. You've been telling yourself that tomorrow you'll be more disciplined, more focused, more serious about your life. But somehow tomorrow keeps moving further away, and the version of you that was supposed to rise never quite shows up. Not because you're incapable, but because you've learned how to survive in comfort instead of fight for your potential. You've become good at explaining your delays, good at justifying your habits, good at making peace with less than what you know you're capable of. And the scariest part is not that you're struggling. The scariest part is that you're starting to get used to it. Your mind is powerful, but it can be your greatest ally or your quietest enemy. It remembers every failure louder than it remembers your victories. It replays your worst moments when you're about to take a risk. It whispers doubt when you're on the edge of growth. And if you don't learn how to challenge that voice, it will shape your identity without your permission. You don't lose in life because you're not talented enough. You lose because you let old stories write your future. You let yesterday's mistakes decide today's confidence. You let fear pretend to be logic. You let comfort pretend to be wisdom. And over time, these small mental compromises turn into a lifestyle of almost discipline, almost focus, almost the person you wanted to become. This video is not here to entertain you. It's here to interrupt the patterns you've been repeating in silence. Because the truth is, nobody is coming to rescue you from your habits. Nobody is going to show up and force you to respect your own potential. The world will let you stay exactly as you are if you allow it. That's not cruelty. That's reality. Change is a personal rebellion against the version of you that settles for average. It's a decision you make in private, not a performance you put on in public. And it always begins with discomfort. Discomfort with your excuses, discomfort with your distractions, discomfort with the gap between who you are and who you know you can be. If you stay with this message until the end, it's not because I'm trying to hype you up. It's because something in you knows you've been called to more. You feel it when you're alone with your thoughts. You feel it when you realize how much time you've wasted. You feel it when you imagine the life you could build if you stop negotiating with your own standards. This is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming honest. Honest about the work you've been avoiding. Honest about the discipline you've been postponing. Honest about the future you either building or betraying with your daily choices. Stay here, not for motivation. Stay here because this could be the moment you finally decide to take your own potential seriously. You are not trapped by what happened to you, but you can be trapped by what you decide to believe about what happened to you. That's the difference between someone who uses the past as a prison and someone who uses it as fuel. Most people don't stay stuck because they fail. They stay stuck because they keep replaying the failure until it becomes their identity. They don't just remember what went wrong. They start to see themselves as the person who always gets it wrong. And once that story settles into your mind, every new opportunity feels dangerous. Every new step feels pointless. And every challenge feels like proof that you were never meant to rise. This is how the past quietly steals your future, not by force, but by suggestion. It whispers to you that you already tried and it didn't work. It tells you that you are late, behind, broken, unlucky, not gifted enough, not strong enough, not meant for more. And if you keep listening to that voice, you will start living a life that matches that lie. The truth is, your past is not powerful on its own. It only has the power you give it. The moment you decide that what happened before is the limit of what can happen next, you hand your future over to yesterday. The past becomes dangerous when you let it define who you are instead of what you learned. Failure, loss, rejection, embarrassment, wasted time, wrong choices, broken relationships. None of these are sentences. They are experiences. They are information. They are data points, not destiny. But when you carry them like chains instead of lessons, they begin to shape how you move, how you speak, how you dream, and how you try. You walk slower, you aim lower, you expect less. You protect yourself from disappointment by shrinking your ambition. And slowly, without realizing it, you build a life that is small enough to feel safe, but too small to ever feel fulfilling. Some of you are still living under the shadow of something that happened years ago. A mistake you made, a chance you missed, a failure that embarrassed you, a betrayal that changed how you trust. You tell yourself you've moved on, but your actions tell a different story. You hesitate when it's time to commit. You overthink when it's time to act. You quit early when things get uncomfortable. You don't fully show up because you're afraid of being hurt again, failing again, being judged again. This is what it looks like when the past owns you. Not when you remember it, but when it controls how boldly you move forward. You're not healing. You're managing your fear. You're not growing. You're protecting your wounds. And deep protection can look smart, but it can also quietly keep you stuck in the same place for years. Letting go of the past doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. It means refusing to let that hurt decide what kind of life you build next. It means you stop using your history as an excuse for your limits and start using it as evidence of your strength. You survived things you thought would break you. You made it through seasons that once felt unbearable. You learned lessons the easy path could never teach you. There is power in that. There is resilience in that. But you only access that power when you change the meaning you attach to your past. When you stop saying, this is why I can't, and start saying, this is why I know I can endure, adapt, and grow. The same experiences that once made you doubt yourself can become the foundation of your confidence if you choose to see them that way. You also have to accept a hard truth. Some of what happened to you is not your fault, but what happens next is your responsibility. Blame might feel comforting because it takes the pressure off you, but it also takes the power away from you. As long as your story is about what others did to you, you remain a character in someone else's narrative. The moment you take ownership of your future, even with all the damage and disadvantages you didn't choose, you become the author of what comes next. This doesn't erase injustice or pain. It simply means you refuse to let injustice and pain be the final chapter. You decide that your story will not end where your worst moment began. Your past self was doing the best they could with the awareness, skills, and strength they had at that time. Judging that version of you with the knowledge you have now is unfair and unproductive. Growth means you see your old choices clearly without self-hate and choose better now. Regret. T becomes toxic when you use it to punish yourself instead of guide yourself. The lesson was never to live in shame. The lesson was to evolve. Every time you say, I should have known better back then, remember this. You know better now. That's not a reason to stay stuck in regret. That's a reason to move forward with intention. The only real failure is refusing to update your behavior after life has tried to teach you something. There is a quiet courage in starting again when your pride remembers how you failed last time. There is a deeper strength in trying again when your mind keeps reminding you how painful the last attempt was. Restarting your life requires you to confront the version of you that is comfortable with familiar pain. Familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar growth. You know how to survive disappointment, so you unconsciously choose situations that recreate it. You know how to live with regret, so you avoid the risk of new hope. Breaking free from the past means breaking free from the comfort of the known struggle. It means you step into uncertainty with the understanding that uncertainty is the price of change. You can either stay loyal to who you were or be brave enough to become who you've been avoiding. Your past does not own you unless you keep paying rent to live in it. Every time you replay old mistakes, you strengthen the walls of that mental prison. Every time you say, this is just how my life is, you reinforce the bars. Freedom begins when you challenge the story you've been telling yourself. When you catch the thought that says, I'm not that kind of person, and you ask, who decided that? When you notice the fear that says, what if it happens again? And you answer, then I will handle it with more strength than before. You don't break free in one dramatic moment. You break free in small daily acts of choosing differently. One brave decision, one uncomfortable action, one honest commitment to grow beyond what once defined you. You are not late to your life. You are right on time for the version of you that is ready to take responsibility for their direction. The past can explain you, but it doesn't have to define you. You get to decide whether yesterday is a lesson or a leash. And the moment you choose to learn instead of submit, to move instead of blame, you take your future back into your own hands. You don't rise in life because you felt inspired one morning. You rise because at some point you made a decision that you were done negotiating with your weakness. Motivation is emotional. It comes and goes. It shows up when things feel exciting and disappears the moment things get hard, boring, repetitive, or uncomfortable. If your progress depends on how motivated you feel, your progress will always be inconsistent. Some days you'll feel fired up and unstoppable, and other days you'll feel heavy, tired, distracted, and unmotivated. That's not a character flaw. That's being human. The mistake is building your entire future on a feeling that you cannot control. Feelings change with sleep, stress, weather, mood, and circumstance. Decisions don't have to. Decisions are commitments you honor even when your emotions argue with you. Most people say they're waiting for motivation, but what they're really waiting for is comfort. They're waiting to feel ready. They're waiting to feel confident. They're waiting for the fear to disappear, but the fear doesn't disappear before the action. The fear fades after the action. Confidence is not the starting point. It's the reward for showing up when you didn't feel confident. Readiness is not something you wait for. It's something you create by stepping into discomfort. The longer you wait to feel motivated, the longer you train your men. D, to avoid effort. You teach yourself that action is optional and emotions are in charge. Over time, this quietly weakens your discipline. You start trusting your moods more than your commitments. And that is how goals die. Not in dramatic failure, but in slow delay. Decision is different. Decision is firm. Decision is when you choose a direction and remove the option of quitting just because it feels uncomfortable. Decision is when you stop having conversations with your excuses. It's when you tell yourself, this is what I'm doing, whether I feel like it or not. That doesn't make you emotionless. It makes you reliable. Reliable to your future self. Reliable to the promises you made when you were clear about what you wanted. Decision is the bridge between who you are today and who you keep saying you want to become. Without that bridge, your dreams stay theoretical. They remain ideas you talk about, not realities you build. There's a moment that comes for everyone who wants more out of life. The moment when the excitement fades and the routine begins. The early phase of change feels powerful. You feel motivated. You imagine a new version of yourself. You visualize success. But then the repetition starts. The early wins slow down. The work becomes ordinary. The grind becomes quiet. Nobody is clapping. Nobody is noticing. This is where most people fall off. Not because they can't do the work, but because the work no longer feeds their emotions. They confuse boredom with a sign to stop. They confuse discomfort with a sign they're doing something wrong. In reality, boredom is often a sign that you've entered the phase where real growth happens. The phase where discipline matters more than excitement. The phase where your character is being built in silence. When you operate on decision, you stop needing external energy to move. You become internally driven. You don't need someone to hype you up to take responsibility. You don't need perfect conditions to show up. You show up because you decided this version of you is non-negotiable. This is powerful because it puts you back in control. You are no longer at the mercy of your moods, your environment, or other people's opinions. You become consistent, not because you're always inspired, but because you've chosen a standard for yourself. Standards are what you live by when motivation disappears. Standards are what guide you on the days when everything in you wants to quit. Your mind will try to bargain with you when things get hard. It will say, you've been working hard. Take a break. Sometimes rest is healthy, but often this voice is not asking for recovery. It's asking for escape. It will say, you can start again tomorrow. Tomorrow is a seductive lie because it feels responsible while still delaying the work. It will say, you deserve comfort after everything you've been through. Comfort is not evil, but when comfort becomes your primary goal, growth becomes optional. Decision cuts through these negotiations. Decision doesn't argue with every excuse. It acknowledges the discomfort and moves anyway. This is not about being harsh with yourself. It's about being honest with yourself. Honest about the gap between the life you want and the habits you currently have. Every meaningful change in your life will eventually demand that you act when you don't feel like it. That's the tax on becoming better. You pay it in effort, consistency, and showing up when it's inconvenient. The people who look disciplined from the outside are not superhuman. They simply decided that their future matters more than their current comfort. They decided that the temporary discomfort of action is better than the permanent discomfort of regret. Regret is heavier than effort. Regret lasts longer than fatigue. You can recover from a hard day of work. You don't easily recover from years of knowing you could have done more and chose not to. There is also a deeper layer to decision: identity. When you decide who you are becoming, your actions begin to align with that identity. You stop asking, do I feel motivated to act like this? And start asking, is this how the person I'm becoming behaves? This shift is powerful because it removes the emotional debate. You're no longer trying to hype yourself up every day. You're simply living in alignment with the chosen standard. Athletes don't train because they feel like it every day. Leaders don't lead because they're always inspired. Builders don't build because the work is always exciting. They act because that's who they've decided to be. The action becomes a reflection of identity, not a response to mood. If you want to change your life, stop waiting for a feeling to rescue you. Feelings are unreliable partners in long-term growth. They are great guests when they show up, but terrible leaders when they're in charge. Let decision take the lead. Decide that your future deserves consistency. Decide that your goals deserve daily action, not occasional bursts of effort. Decide that you will honor your commitments even when your emotions are loud. This doesn't mean you ignore your feelings. It means you don't let them vote on your values. You can feel tired and still act with discipline. You can feel afraid and still move forward. You can feel unmotivated and still keep your word to yourself. The day you stop waiting to feel motivated and start acting from decision is the day your life begins to change at a deeper level. Because now you're not just chasing a result. You're building a character that can sustain. You're not dependent on hype. You're grounded in commitment. You're no longer asking for energy from the outside. You're generating direction from within. That's the difference between people who start strong and people who finish strong. Pain is not here to destroy you. It's here to inform you. It shows up in your life as a signal, not a sentence. But most people misunderstand pain. They treat it like a verdict on who they are and what they deserve, instead of treating it like feedback on what needs to change, what needs to heal, what needs to grow. When something hurts, emotionally, mentally, physically, the natural instinct is to run from it, numb it, distract from it, or pretend it's not there. But avoidance doesn't erase pain. It just teaches pain to follow you into every area of your life. The discomfort you refuse to face doesn't disappear. It waits. It leaks into your habits, your relationships, your confidence, and your decisions. It shapes your behavior from the shadows until you finally turn around and look at it. Pain carries information about your boundaries. It tells you where you've been tolerating what you shouldn't. It shows you where you've been overgiving, underprotecting yourself, or ignoring your own needs. When something keeps hurting in the same way, it's often because the same lesson keeps being ignored. The pain is not random. It's repetitive for a reason. It points to patterns you haven't corrected yet. You stay in environments that drain you. You keep people in your life who disrespect your limits. You repeat habits that sabotage your progress. Then you wonder why you feel exhausted, resentful, or empty. Pain is not punishing you. It's highlighting misalignment. It's showing you where your actions and your values don't match. If you listen to that signal instead of numbing it, pain becomes a guide. It directs you toward change. There's a difference between pain that comes from growth and pain that comes from self-betrayal. Growth pain stretches you. It challenges your comfort zone. It feels uncomfortable because you're doing something new, something demanding, something that requires discipline. This kind of pain is temporary and purposeful. It comes with forward movement. Self-betrayal pain, on the other hand, is the pain of knowing you're not honoring your potential. It's the ache of procrastination, the weight of staying in situations that shrink you, the quiet disappointment of breaking promises to yourself. This pain lingers because it's connected to avoidance. The longer you delay change, the heavier this pain becomes. When you confuse these two types of pain, you end up avoiding the very discomfort that could set you free while tolerating the pain that slowly keeps you small. Many people develop unhealthy relationships with pain. Some wear it like a badge of honor, believing suffering alone makes them strong. Others numb it with distractions, endless scrolling, unhealthy habits, toxic relationships, overworking, or anything that keeps them from sitting with their own thoughts. Both extremes miss the point. Pain is not something to glorify, and it's not something to escape at all costs. It's something to understand. The moment you ask, what is this pain trying to teach me? You shift from being a victim of your experiences to being a student of your own life. That question changes everything. It moves you from reaction to reflection. Instead of just feeling hurt, you start learning from what hurt you. You begin to see patterns in your choices. You begin to notice what drains your energy and what strengthens it. You start making adjustments not out of fear, but out of awareness. Pain also reveals your attachments. It shows you what you're holding on to that no longer serves you. If letting go of something hurts deeply, it often means you attached your identity to it. A relationship, a role, a version of yourself, a dream that has expired. When these things fall apart, the pain can feel like your entire sense of self is collapsing. But that collapse is not the end of you. It's the end of a chapter that has run its course. Pain marks transitions. It's the emotional signal that you're crossing from one version of yourself into another. Resisting that transition makes the pain heavier. Accepting that transition allows the pain to do its job and then pass. You don't heal by pretending the loss didn't matter. You heal by allowing it to matter without letting it define your worth. Pain can also sharpen your priorities. After enough discomfort, you start getting honest about what actually matters. You stop wasting energy on things that don't move you forward. You stop tolerating chaos in areas where you need stability. You stop negotiating with behaviors that keep you stuck. This clarity often comes after breakdowns, not before breakthroughs. The pain of hitting emotional or mental rock bottom can strip away illusions. It forces you to confront the reality of your situation without filters. And while that moment feels brutal, it's also powerful, because when excuses fall apart, what's left is truth. And truth, even when it hurts, gives you something solid to build on. You can't build a strong future on denial. Pain breaks denial. It exposes what needs to be rebuilt. There's a quiet strength in learning to sit with discomfort without immediately trying to escape it. This doesn't mean you wallow in pain. It means you allow yourself to feel it long enough to understand it. When you rush to numb pain, you rob yourself of insight. You skip the lesson and only feel the wound. When you slow down and ask what this experience is teaching you about your boundaries, your needs, your patterns, and your values, you turn pain into a tool for growth. This process requires emotional courage. It's easier to distract yourself than to reflect on your own behavior. It's easier to blame others than to examine your choices. But reflection is where power is reclaimed. You start making changes, not because you're afraid of pain, but because you respect the message it carries. Pain does not get the final say in who you become unless you let it. Experiences shape you, but they don't get to decide your identity. The same pain that could harden you can also humble you. The same pain that could make you bitter can also make you wiser. The difference is in how you process it. If you carry pain as proof that life is against you, you move through the world guarded and resentful. If you carry pain as evidence that you have survived and learned, you move through the world with grounded strength. You don't become naive, but you also don't become closed. You become discerning. You choose better boundaries. You choose healthier patterns. You choose growth over repetition. Your life will include pain, whether you chase growth or avoid it. Avoiding growth doesn't eliminate pain. It just delays the kind that leads to change and multiplies the kind that leads to regret. When you start seeing pain as information instead of a life sentence, you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this showing me about how I need to live differently? That shift turns suffering into signal, confusion into clarity, and wounds into wisdom. Pain becomes part of your education, not the definition of your destiny. Emotions are real, powerful, and human, but they are terrible leaders. They change with your sleep, your stress, your environment, your expectations, and even your hunger. If your daily actions depend on how you feel in the moment, your life will move in circles. Some days you'll feel confident and unstoppable, and you'll take action. Other days you'll feel tired, bored, frustrated, or insecure, and you'll pull back. This emotional up and down creates inconsistency, and inconsistency quietly kills progress. Discipline is what keeps you moving when your emotions try to talk you out of doing what you already decided matters. It's not about becoming cold or robotic. It's about choosing direction over mood, commitment over comfort, and long-term growth over short-term relief. Most people don't fail because they don't know what to do. They fail because they don't do what they know consistently. They wait to feel in the mood to work on their goals. They wait for energy to magically appear. They wait for confidence to show up before they take action. But action is what creates energy. Movement creates momentum. Consistency creates confidence. When you wait for emotions to lead, you put your progress on hold until conditions feel perfect. Perfect conditions never arrive. Life will always be messy, distracting, and demanding. Discipline is what allows you to make progress inside imperfect conditions. It's the ability to act even when the timing feels inconvenient and the work feels boring. Emotions are designed to be experienced, not obeyed. Feeling tired doesn't mean you stop. Feeling afraid doesn't mean you retreat. Feeling unmotivated doesn't mean you give up. These feelings are signals, not commands. They tell you what's happening inside you, but they don't get to decide your standards. When you let emotions drive your choices, you build habits around avoidance. You train yourself to escape discomfort instead of facing it. Over time, your tolerance for effort decreases. Small challenges start to feel overwhelming. Discipline works in the opposite direction. It trains you to stay present with discomfort long enough to act anyway. This doesn't mean you ignore your well-being. It means you learn the difference between genuine rest and emotional avoidance. Rest restores you so you can return stronger. Avoidance delays the work and weakens your trust in yourself. there is a powerful relationship between discipline and self-respect. Every time you do what you said you would do, even when you don't feel like it, you build trust with yourself. That trust becomes quiet confidence. You begin to see yourself as someone who follows through. On the other hand, every time you break a promise to yourself because you didn't feel in the mood, you weaken that trust. Over time, you start doubting your own word. You set goals, but you don't fully believe you'll keep them. This creates internal friction. You want more from life, but you don't trust yourself to do the work required to get it. Discipline repairs that relationship. It aligns your actions with your intentions. It closes the gap between who you say you want to be and how you actually live. Discipline also simplifies decision making. When you rely on emotions, you're constantly debating with yourself. Should I do this now or later? Do I feel like it today? Am I too tired? Is this really necessary? This mental negotiation drains energy before you even start the task. Discipline removes the debate. The decision is already made. You act because it's part of your standard, not because you feel inspired. This saves mental energy for the work itself. Over time, disciplined actions become habits, and habits reduce friction. What once felt hard becomes automatic. This is how disciplined people appear strong from the outside. They're not using willpower every moment. They've built systems and habits that carry them forward even on low energy days. Discipline doesn't mean you push yourself into burnout. It means you structure your life in a way that supports consistent effort. It means you plan your days with intention. You create routines that make the right actions easier to take. You design your environment to reduce distractions. You choose commitments you can realistically sustain. This kind of discipline is compassionate but firm. It understands that you're human, but it doesn't let your humanity become an excuse for chronic inconsistency. You learn to pace yourself without quitting on yourself. You learn to rest without abandoning your goals. You learn to recover without resetting to zero every time life gets hard. Emotional living often leads to cycles of intensity and collapse. You start strong when you're excited, then fall off when the excitement fades. You make big promises in moments of motivation, then struggle to keep them in moments of fatigue. This creates a pattern of guilt and frustration. You feel bad for not being consistent, which lowers your energy even more, making it harder to restart. Discipline breaks this cycle by lowering the emotional stakes of action. You don't need to feel amazing to take a small, meaningful step. You just take the step because it's part of who you're becoming. Small, disciplined actions done consistently outperform intense effort done occasionally. This is how long-term change is built. Quietly, steadily, without drama. Choosing discipline over emotion is also choosing your future over your present comfort. Emotions often prioritize what feels good now. Discipline prioritizes what will matter later. This doesn't mean you deny yourself joy. It means you don't sacrifice your long-term goals for short-term relief. You learn to delay gratification. You learn to sit with discomfort when it serves your growth. This skill compounds over time. The more you practice discipline, the easier it becomes to choose growth in other areas of your life. You become someone who doesn't collapse under pressure, who doesn't quit when the mood drops, who doesn't abandon their path because the journey got uncomfortable. The real power of discipline is that it gives you freedom. At first, it feels restrictive because it asks you to follow through regardless of how you feel. But over time, discipline creates options. It creates competence, stability, and confidence. You become more capable, more reliable, and more resilient. You are no longer trapped in cycles of emotional decision-making. You are grounded in standards that move you forward, even on hard days. When discipline becomes your baseline, emotions can still exist, but they no longer control the direction of your life. You feel what you feel, and you still do what needs to be done. That's how growth becomes inevitable. Perfect conditions are a myth people cling to. when they're afraid to start. The idea that you need the right timing, the right resources, the right support, the right mood, and the right confidence before you take action is comforting because it removes responsibility from the present moment. It tells you that delay is reasonable. It tells you that waiting is wise. But most of the time, waiting is just fear dressed up as logic. Life doesn't arrange itself neatly before you move. Movement is what creates clarity. Action is what reveals what works and what doesn't. If you keep waiting for everything to line up, you will spend your life preparing to live instead of actually living. There is no such thing as a perfect moment to change your life. There are only moments where you decide to begin despite uncertainty. Every meaningful path starts in messiness. You begin before you feel ready. You learn while you're doing. You adjust after you make mistakes. The belief that you need to have it all figured out before you start is one of the most subtle forms of self-sabotage. It feels responsible, but it keeps you inactive. You convince yourself that you're being patient, strategic, or cautious, when in reality, you're avoiding the vulnerability of being a beginner. Being a beginner is uncomfortable because it exposes your inexperience. It forces you to look imperfect in front of yourself and others. But imperfection is not a flaw in growth. It's the entry point. Waiting for perfect conditions also creates unrealistic expectations. You start believing that progress should feel smooth and controlled. Then, when obstacles show up, as they always do, you interpret them as signs that you started at the wrong time or that you're not ready yet. This mindset trains you to quit early. You expect the road to be clear before you take the first step. But roads become clear because people walk them. Resistance is not a signal to stop. Resistance is often the evidence that you've stepped into something that matters. If you only move when things feel easy, you limit yourself to paths that don't require growth. Growth lives in friction. It lives in figuring things out as you go, not in waiting for certainty to appear. Most of the people you admire didn't start with perfect setups. They started with confusion, limited resources, self-doubt, and messy beginnings. They learned through trial and error. They adjusted after failing. They built clarity by moving, not by waiting. But from the outside, we tend to only see the polished result. This creates a false comparison. Why? Compare your behind-the-scenes uncertainty with someone else's finished product and conclude that you're not ready yet. That comparison is unfair. You're judging your starting point against someone else's highlight reel. The reality is that everyone starts where you are now, unsure, imperfect, and figuring it out in real time. The difference is not in how ready they felt. The difference is that they chose to start anyway. Waiting for perfect conditions can also become a form of procrastination that feels productive. You research endlessly. You plan obsessively. You think about what you'll do when the timing is right. Planning is useful, but only up to a point. Planning without action becomes a way to avoid the discomfort of doing. At some point, more thinking doesn't create more clarity. It creates more delay. Action creates feedback. Feedback creates improvement. Improvement creates confidence. Confidence is not something you gather before you start. It's something you build by starting. The first version of anything meaningful you do will be flawed. That's not a sign you failed. That's proof you began. There's also a deeper emotional layer to waiting. Waiting protects your ego. As long as you haven't started, you can imagine success without risking failure. You can hold on to the identity of potential without confronting the reality of effort. The moment you begin, your self-image is exposed to reality. You might struggle. You might fail. You might realize you're not as skilled as you hoped. This can feel threatening to your sense of worth. But growth requires you to trade the comfort of imagined potential for the discomfort of earned progress. You don't become capable by waiting to feel capable. You become capable by doing things that reveal where you need to improve. Starting in imperfect conditions teaches you adaptability. You learn to solve problems as they arise instead of trying to predict and prevent every possible obstacle. This builds resilience. You stop needing everything to be controlled in order to move forward. You become comfortable with uncertainty. This skill is powerful because life is unpredictable. If you require certainty before you act, you will constantly feel stuck. If you can move inside uncertainty, you remain flexible and responsive. You adjust your strategy instead of abandoning your direction. You learn that obstacles are part of the process, not signs that you chose the wrong path. There's a quiet confidence that comes from acting without waiting for perfect conditions. You begin to trust your ability to figure things out. You stop outsourcing your momentum to circumstances. You realize that you don't need permission from the world to start building your life. You give yourself that permission. This shifts your relationship with fear. Fear doesn't disappear, but it stops being the gatekeeper of your actions. You learn to move with fear instead of waiting for fear to leave. Over time, fear loses its authority. It becomes background noise instead of a command. This is not recklessness. It's courage grounded in responsibility. You take calculated steps forward, knowing you will adjust along the way. The cost of waiting is often invisible in the moment, but heavy in the long run. You don't usually regret the things you tried and learned from as much as you regret the chances you never took. Regret compounds quietly. Each delay makes the next delay easier. Each not now strengthens the habit of postponing your own growth. Over years, this becomes a lifestyle of almost and maybes. You almost started, you maybe will one day. This slow erosion of momentum is far more damaging than a few early mistakes ever could be. Mistakes can be corrected. Inaction can't be recovered from in the same way because time doesn't return. Starting before you feel ready doesn't mean acting without thought. It means acting without waiting for perfection. It means accepting that clarity grows with movement. It means understanding that the path reveals itself step by step, not all at once. When you stop waiting for perfect conditions, you reclaim time, energy, and agency. You begin building evidence that you are someone who moves when it matters, not someone who waits for life to become convenient. And that shift alone can change the entire trajectory of your future. Distractions don't look dangerous at first. They look harmless, even normal. A little scrolling, a little entertainment, a little gossip, a little comfort, a little procrastination. None of these things feel like they're destroying your future in the moment. That's what makes them powerful. They don't attack you loudly. They slowly drain you quietly. You don't wake up one day and lose your direction overnight. You lose it in small daily moments where you trade your attention for something that gives you nothing back. Your future is built by what you consistently focus on, and your focus is constantly being sold to the loudest, easiest, and most comfortable option around you. If you don't protect your attention, someone else will profit from it while you pay the price. Every distraction has an opportunity cost. Time spent on things that don't move you forward is time not spent building what you say you want. This doesn't mean every moment has to be productive, but it does mean you should be honest about what's actually restoring you and what's just numbing you. There's a difference between intentional rest and mindless escape. Rest fills you back up. Escape leaves you emptier than before. Many people confuse the two. They tell themselves they're relaxing, but they come back more drained, more scattered, and more behind on what matters. This creates a cycle where you feel overwhelmed because you haven't made progress, so you escape to distractions, which then make you feel more overwhelmed. The loop tightens quietly, and before you realize it, your days are full, but your life isn't moving. Distractions also fragment your ability to think deeply. When your attention is constantly being pulled in different directions, your mind never gets to sit with a problem long enough to solve it. You start craving quick hits of stimulation instead of sustained focus. This weakens your patience Tasks that require effort feel heavier than they actually are because your mind has been trained to seek novelty instead of depth. Over time, this can make meaningful work feel unbearable. You sit down to focus, and within minutes, your mind reaches for your phone, a tab, a notification, or some other escape. This isn't because you're incapable of focus. It's because you've trained your attention to live in fragments. Rebuilding focus requires you to intentionally remove the things that keep stealing your attention, not just hoping your willpower will magically become stronger. Some distractions are external, but many are internal. Overthinking is a distraction. Worry is a distraction. Constantly replaying conversations in your head is a distraction. Guiding worst case scenarios is a distraction. These mental habits feel like thinking, but they don't lead to action. They create the illusion of engagement without producing movement. You can spend hours in your head and still not take one meaningful step forward. Cutting distractions is not just about limiting what's around you. It's about limiting what you entertain in your mind. You don't need to follow every thought that appears. You can notice a thought and choose not to build a house around it. This mental discipline protects your energy. It keeps you from burning hours on loops that lead nowhere. Distractions are especially dangerous because they steal your momentum when you're just starting to build it. The early stages of change are fragile. Your habits are not solid yet. Your identity is still forming. In this phase, distractions don't just slow you down. They can knock you completely off track. One missed day becomes two. Two becomes a week. A week becomes the story that you're inconsistent, and then that story becomes the excuse to stop trying altogether. This is why protecting your focus early on is so important. You're not just protecting time, you're protecting the fragile belief that you can change. Every small win strengthens that belief. Every unnecessary distraction weakens it. You also have to look at the people and environments that pull you away from your growth. Not everyone who distracts you does it intentionally. Some people are just living in a different direction. Their habits, conversations, and priorities don't align with where you're trying to go. If you spend most of your time in environments that reward comfort, drama, and distraction, it becomes harder to sustain focus on growth. This doesn't mean you isolate yourself from everyone. It means you become intentional about where and with whom you spend your energy. Your environment shapes your behavior more than your motivation ever will. If you want to protect your future, you have to design your environment in a way that makes focus easier and distraction harder. Cutting distractions will feel uncomfortable at first because distractions often serve as emotional anesthesia. They help you avoid boredom, discomfort, loneliness, and the tension of doing hard things. When you remove them, those feelings come back to the surface. This is not a sign that cutting distractions is wrong. It's a sign that you're finally present with your own experience. Presence is where growth happens. It's also where discomfort lives. Learning to sit with that discomfort without immediately escaping builds emotional strength. You become less reactive. You stop needing constant stimulation to feel okay. This quiet strength makes focus work feel more natural over time. Protecting your focus is an act of self-respect. It's a way of saying that your goals, your growth, and your future deserve your full attention. You don't have to eliminate all pleasure from your life. You just have to stop letting cheap pleasure dominate your best hours. When you give your most focused energy to things that don't matter, you leave your real goals with leftovers. This imbalance slowly erodes your belief in yourself. You start feeling behind, not because you're incapable, but because your attention is being spent elsewhere. Reclaiming your focus realigns your energy with what you say you want. Your actions start matching your intentions again. Your future is built in small, focused blocks of time that you protect from unnecessary noise. You don't need perfect focus all day. You need consistent pockets of deep attention directed at what actually matters. Over time, these pockets compound. Small focused actions done daily create momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence makes focus easier. This cycle works in your favor when you protect your attention, but it works against you when you let distractions run your days. The choice is quiet and daily. No dramatic moment decides it for you. You decide it every time you choose what gets your attention. Becoming obsessed with your next level doesn't mean you lose balance or become blind to everything else in your life. It means you stop treating your growth like a side hobby and start treating it like a priority. Most people say they want more, but they organize their lives around what's easy. Their goals sit in the background while comfort, distraction, and other people's expectations take center stage. Obsession, in this sense, is about intensity of focus. It's about caring enough to structure your days around becoming better, not just thinking about becoming better. When your next level becomes a priority, your choices begin to change. You start asking yourself different questions. Instead of what do I feel like doing right now, you ask, what moves me closer to the person I'm trying to become? That shift alone changes the trajectory of your actions. Most breakthroughs don't come from mild interest. They come from deep commitment. When you're mildly interested in growth, you work on yourself when it's convenient. When you're deeply committed, you work on yourself when it's inconvenient. The gap between those two approaches is massive. Over time, mild interest creates occasional effort. Deep commitment creates daily standards. Obsession with your next level is what closes the gap between potential and performance. It's the internal fire that makes you say no to things that don't serve your future and yes to habits that build it. This kind of obsession is not loud. It's quiet, consistent, and disciplined. It shows up in your routines, not in your announcements. When you become obsessed with your next level, you start seeing your current habits through a different lens. You notice which behaviors are aligned with growth and which ones are just comfortable. You become less tolerant of patterns that keep you average. This doesn't mean you hate your current self. It means you respect your future self enough to change your present behavior. There's a difference between self-acceptance and self-settlement. Self-acceptance means you don't shame yourself for where you are. Self-settlement means you decide that where you are is where you'll stay. Obsession with your next level is the refusal to settle. It's the decision that your current limitations are temporary and that your identity is still under construction. This mindset changes how you experience discomfort. When growth is your priority, discomfort becomes a sign that you're on the edge of expansion, not a signal to retreat. You stop interpreting struggle as proof that you're not capable. You start interpreting it as proof that you're stretching beyond what's familiar. This reframing is powerful because it changes your relationship with effort. Effort stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like investment. You're willing to endure temporary difficulty because you're clear about what you're building. This clarity reduces the emotional weight of sacrifice. You're not just giving things up, you're trading them for something you value more. Becoming obsessed with your next level also sharpens your boundaries. You become more selective with your time, energy, and attention, not because you think you're better than others, but because you understand that your resources are limited. Every yes to something that doesn't move you forward is a no to something that could. This awareness doesn't make you rigid, it makes you intentional. You still enjoy life, but you're no longer careless with your best hours. You protect us. Parts of your day, when you have the most energy and focus, you start designing your environment to support your growth. This could mean changing routines, limiting distractions, or spending more time around people who take their own development seriously. Your environment becomes an ally instead of an obstacle. There's also a psychological shift. That happens when you commit deeply to your next level. Your self-talk changes. You start speaking to yourself like someone who is in training for a higher standard of life. You become more honest about your excuses. You catch yourself when you start rationalizing procrastination. This isn't about being harsh with yourself. It's about being real with yourself. You stop romanticizing your struggle and start taking responsibility for your patterns. This honesty is uncomfortable at first because it removes the stories that protected your ego. But it's also freeing because it puts your growth back in your control. You're no longer waiting for external validation to take yourself seriously. You validate your own effort by showing up consistently. Obsession with your next level also changes how you measure progress. You stop needing immediate dramatic results to stay committed. You begin to value small, consistent improvements. You pay attention to your habits, your discipline, your mindset, and your ability to recover from setbacks. This long-term view protects you from burnout and discouragement. You understand that real change compounds quietly. You're not chasing quick wins for emotional highs. You're building systems that support steady growth. This patience is part of the obsession. You're in it for who you're becoming, not just what you're getting. Setbacks don't disappear when you're committed to your next level. You still fail. You still fall off at times. The difference is how you respond. Instead of using setbacks as proof that you're not meant for more, you use them as feedback. You adjust your strategy. You look at what went wrong without turning it into a story about who you are. This ability to separate your actions from your identity is crucial. You can fail without becoming a failure. You can struggle without becoming weak. Obsession with your next level gives you the resilience to return to your standards quickly after you slip. You don't spiral into self-punishment. You reset and refocus. When you organize your life around becoming better, your confidence grows in a grounded way. It's not based on hype or comparison. It's based on evidence. You see yourself showing up on hard days. You see yourself choosing growth over comfort repeatedly. This builds a quiet, unshakable belief in your ability to handle challenges. Over time, you become less impressed by motivation and more impressed by consistency. You respect yourself not for what you plan to do, but for what you actually do. That self-respect fuels further growth. The cycle becomes self-reinforcing. Commitment builds confidence. Confidence supports consistency. And consistency moves you closer to your next level. Becoming obsessed with your next level is ultimately about taking your life seriously. Not in a heavy, joyless way, but in a purposeful way. You recognize that your time is limited and your potential is not. You stop treating your growth like something you'll get to one day and start building it into how you live now. This doesn't require perfection. It requires devotion to progress. And when that devotion becomes part of your identity, your next level stops being a distant dream and starts becoming the direction you walk in every day. Right now, in this exact moment, you have a choice, not a loud choice, not a dramatic one, a quiet personal decision that nobody else can make for you. You can leave this message inspired for a few minutes and then return to the same habits, the same patterns, the same comfort that has kept you stuck. Or you can decide that this moment is the line in the sand where the old version of you stops getting a vote in how your life is lived. Change doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It begins with a decision you honor when nobody is watching, when the noise fades, when the screen goes dark, and you're alone with your standards. You've heard the ideas: restart, reset, refocus. But these words only have power if they turn into action. Restart means you stop carrying yesterday into today like it's your identity. Reset means you stop feeding your mind the same excuses and distractions and expect different results. Refocus means you stop scattering your energy and start directing it toward what actually builds your future. None of this requires perfection. It requires honesty. Honest about where you've been weak. Honest about what you've been avoiding. Honest about the cost of staying the same, because staying the same is not neutral. It's expensive. It costs you time. It costs you confidence. It costs you the version of you that could exist if you stop negotiating with your comfort. The world doesn't change when you feel motivated. The world changes when you act while you're tired, while you're uncertain, while you're not in the mood. This is where most people quit, not because they can't do the work, but because they don't want to do it when it stops feeling exciting. Don't let your future be built by moods that change every day. Build it with standards that don't change when things get uncomfortable. The days that test your discipline are the days that build your character. The moments that ask you to choose effort over ease are the moments that separate people who talk about change from people who become it. You don't need to fix your entire life tonight. You just need to stop lying to yourself about what needs to change. One honest decision can shift your direction. One disciplined action can restore your belief in yourself. One focused hour can remind you that you're capable of more than you've been given. Momentum is built in small, quiet wins that nobody applauds, but those wins stack. And one day you look back and realize the distance between who you were and who you've become was built in moments just like this. Moments where you chose to act instead of wait. When this video ends, the real work begins. Not tomorrow, not when it's convenient. Now, close the gap between what you say you want and what you do today. Restart your standards, reset your habits, refocus your energy. No one is coming to do this for you. And that's not a threat. It's power, because it means your future is in your hands right now, and the next move is yours.